Welcome to the Inner Ascent, the podcast exploring the hidden dimensions of mind, energy, and consciousness. In this episode, Kundalini Awakening, Fire of Transformation. We'll journey into the ancient mystery of the Serpent Power, the divine force said to lie coiled at the base of the spine, waiting to rise and awaken higher consciousness. What happens when it awakens? How does it transform body, mind, and soul? Let's explore the sacred fire within, the fire of transformation.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've brought us a fascinating stack of sources today. A real collection, isn't it? Ancient yogic wisdom, detailed guides on Kriya Yoga, and these, quite searing memoirs, almost terrifying accounts from people like Gopi Krishna, and of course the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
So we are strapping in today for an exploration into something often shrouded in mysticism, but described here very differently. Kundalini. Not just spirituality, but framed as the deepest, most sophisticated evolutionary engine within the human body itself.
Exactly. And that's key. People hear Kundalini, they think, maybe New Age stuff or abstract meditation. But our mission today is much more concrete, really.
Right.
We're trying to synthesize these sources to get at the core physiological mechanism, like what is actually moving in the body. Then the specific techniques needed to, accelerate this.
Accelerate evolution, essentially.
Precisely. And then the really intense part, the disruptive physical and mental crisis that seems to happen during the awakening. It's not always blissful, apparently.
Doesn't sound like it from these accounts.
No. And finally, what happens after? The profound, world-altering transformation once this energy is stabilized.
And the hook right from the get-go, it seems, is that this is way beyond just finding calm or focusing better. The source is called Kundalini, an extremely subtle and intricate mechanism located in the sexual region. And they declare it the absolute biological basis of evolution and development of personality. It immediately shifts the whole conversation, doesn't it? From self-help to something like predetermined physiological destiny.
It changes everything. Because if Kundalini really is the biological basis of evolution, then spiritual growth isn't just about belief or faith anymore. It's about upgrading the actual hardware, the human nervous system, the brain structure itself. The sources suggest our current biology kind of limits our consciousness to the material world.
Right. Keeps us locked in.
Yeah. And this energy, once activated, is supposedly designed to reshape the organism, to prepare us for higher functions, states of awareness that are just, beyond the capacity of the average person's physical frame right now.
So we're talking about a kind of forced evolution almost, a biological jumpstart for the species.
That's the argument, precisely. It connects spiritual goals directly to bodily metamorphosis, saying the true point of existence is to reach this superior state of consciousness, which is, latent within all of us.
Okay, let's unpack that mechanism then, focusing on how these ancient traditions saw this specific force. You mentioned Shakti. They talk about Kundalini as a powerful energy, often called power or force, that lies dormant. Where exactly?
It rests coiled like a snake. That's where the serpent imagery comes from, of course, right at the base of the spinal column, near the cuspex.
And why there? Why is that location significant?
Well, it's the lowest of the body's energy centers, the foundation, you could say. The imagery captures this sense of immense, latent, raw power just waiting. And it's the energy sustaining our lower sort of instinctual life.
And what happens when this energy is successfully roused? One source said warmed up, which sounds almost gentle.
Gentle is probably not the right word for the experience itself. But yeah, when it's activated, it begins this intense, often fiery ascent. It travels up the Sushumna Nadi, that's the central energetic channel corresponding to the spine.
Okay.
Aiming directly for the highest point in the head, the crown. The whole spiritual path, in this view, is essentially guiding this energy up through the body's core.
So the journey is the ascent. What's the goal then? What happens when it actually reaches the crown? What does that resulting mystical state feel like?
The outcome is described as, profound. The sources define the ultimate goal as inducing nirvikalpa samadhi.
Okay, nirvikalpa samadhi.
Yeah, and this isn't just, a nice meditation state. It's described as an indescribable feeling of utter bliss and the complete disappearance of all duality consciousness.
Duality consciousness, meaning?
No separation. Between you, the observer, and what's observed.
Yeah.
Self and spirit just merge. It's described as eternal life peace, joy beyond all imagination.
Now, it seems important to clarify that term, samadhi. We hear it a lot. What makes nirvikalpa samadhi different from, say, a lesser or temporary trance state?
That's a crucial distinction, yeah. The sources contrast it specifically with savikalpa samadhi.
Okay.
Savikalpa is more like a temporary trance. You achieve the perception of God, or the absolute, but only while you're completely still, deep in meditation. You come out of it, and you're back to normal dualistic perception.
Got it.
Nirvikalpa, on the other hand, is the state of no return, you might say. The perception of the absolute is stabilized. It's maintained even while you're moving around doing daily tasks.
Wow, so it's a permanent shift.
A permanent, irreversible transformation of consciousness. The individual's identity is totally merged with the infinite. And this state is said to destroy the 3 corks of ignorance, as they put it, and the very seed of all future desires.
And to make that ascent, the energy has to interact with our physical structure. This brings us to the chakras, right?
Yes, exactly. The sources describe the chakras as these occult cerebrospinal centers. Think of them maybe as high-energy switching stations along the way.
Switching stations, okay.
Or, more dramatically, like 7 trapdoors located along the brain and spinal axis. As the Kundalini energy rises, it hits and activates these centers. It clears them out, restructures the neural pathways associated with them. And this activation allows the yogi, at least momentarily, to escape the limitations of the physical body. It effectively unlocks the physical prison, letting them realize their fundamental connection to spirit.
Which loops back to that really revolutionary claim you mentioned at the start. This isn't some niche esoteric path for a few monks. It's positioned as the key to the next human evolutionary leap.
It is. It's framed as the next biological step for the species. The sources argue Kundalini is an empirically demonstrable power. Testable, even if intensely personal.
Yeah.
Capable of literally reshaping the organism for a superior kind of functioning. It's presented as the common inheritance of man in the distant future.
So the great prophets and thinkers, they weren't necessarily exceptions.
Well, the idea here is they were individuals who, either spontaneously or through intense practice, accessed this evolutionary force ahead of the curve. They achieved a state that these texts suggest is actually the predetermined state for all of us, eventually.
Okay, so we all have this coiled power waiting for some distant future. But the obvious next question is, can we get there faster?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what the yogis claim they cracked, the science of acceleration.
That phrase, distant future, makes it sound like millions of years away. But then the sources immediately say, no, you can drastically speed this up. Shortcut the whole evolutionary process using specific scientific techniques. What's the main method they highlight for doing that?
The technique that really stands out as the cornerstone is Kriya Yoga. The ancient masters apparently discovered that the key to unlocking cosmic consciousness lies primarily in mastery over the breath.
Breath mastery. Okay, but not just deep breathing exercises, right?
No, much more than that. It's described as a precise scientific method designed specifically to free up life force prana, they call it.
How does mastering breath physically free up life force? That sounds like a pretty big claim.
Well, the principle relies on the relationship between breath and metabolism. A huge chunk of our vital energy, our prana, is constantly being used up just to keep the heart pumping, lungs working, all that basic biological stuff.
Makes sense.
Kriya Yoga techniques are designed to consciously slow down the metabolic rate, regulate the breath in very specific ways, and by doing that, scientifically reduce the amount of prana spent on those basic functions.
Oh, okay. So you're reclaiming energy.
Exactly. And that liberated prana isn't just saved. It's then consciously directed upwards towards stimulating and refining the brain and nervous system for those higher states of consciousness we talked about.
So the breath is more than just, keeping us alive biologically. The sources suggest it's actually the mechanism that anchors us to this physical life.
They literally call it the band that ties the soul to the body.
Wow.
And Kriya is presented as a scientific method designed to cut this bond. By doing so, it facilitates an extension of life because you're using less energy and an infinite expansion of consciousness. It effectively halts the constant mental tug of war that ties our awareness to the senses, granting almost instantaneous access to deeper levels.
The sources really drive home the impact of this acceleration in terms of time. You mentioned that distant future. What kind of timescale compression are we actually talking about here?
The contrast they draw is, frankly, staggering.
It's core to the argument for using a scientific technique. Under normal, slow, natural evolutionary processes, the refinement needed for the brain to express cosmic consciousness might take. Well, the text says 1,000,000 sun years.
1,000,000 years, okay.
The Kriya Yogi, by scientifically applying these precise techniques, can compress that immense timeline drastically, advancing their personal evolution potentially within a single lifetime. They're essentially leveraging a kind of biological loophole.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But accelerating evolution that intensely, it must require more than just specific breathing techniques, surely. The sources mention major lifestyle and mental shifts being necessary. One area that keeps coming up is the transformation of sexual energy.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Crucial to the preparatory process. The sources consistently highlight that a reorganization of the sexual impulse is required.
Why is that so central?
Because seminal fluid, the seed, as they call it, is recognized as the physical substance most highly charged with prana. It's seen as the most potent energetic output of the human body.
So the essential idea is to learn to discern this power, this fluid, and discharge it upwards, internally rather than outwards, through sexual release.
Internal recirculation.
Exactly. This internal recirculation of highly charged prana is considered critical for feeding the higher brain centers and fueling the whole Kundalini Ascent. It's about redirecting the creative impulse from external procreation towards internal self-realization.
And what about managing the process itself? When you're dealing with energy moving at that kind of accelerated pace, there must be a real risk of pushing too hard too fast.
A tremendous risk, yes. Which is why moderation and the right mindset are stressed constantly. We hear accounts of people engaging in, say, excessive meditation practices, awakening the energy before their nervous system is adequately purified or prepared.
And suffering for it.
And suffering magnified discomfort, yes. The guidance from the masters emphasizes inner stability and, frankly, fierce resilience. If these powerful internal currents start manifesting as terrifying physical symptoms, things that look and feel like a genuine illness, the practitioner gets some pretty harsh advice.
Like what?
Like, don't ever believe in the reality of your illness, for an unheeded guest soon withdraws.
Wow. That sounds deeply unsettling, especially from a modern Western perspective. How do they justify telling someone to essentially ignore severe physical distress?
Well, the argument is that these symptoms are often the body's instinctive, panic-driven resistance. They aren't necessarily a genuine physical disease in the conventional sense. The pain or the illness is seen as an energetic block manifesting physically. The guest is the Kundalini energy trying to force its way through a channel that isn't quite ready. By refusing to acknowledge the symptom as real or debilitating, the practitioner mentally withdraws energy from that reaction.
So you stop feeding the resistance.
You stop feeding the resistance, allowing the current, hopefully, to pass, without getting snagged on the physical manifestation of the disruption. It's framed as a profound exercise in mental fortitude over deep-seated physiological panic.
Okay, so Kriya Yoga gives the power to accelerate this evolution, but that very power seems to inevitably lead into a period of extreme physical and psychological upheaval, which brings us to what sounds like the most terrifying part of the journey, the crisis itself.
Yes, it's often described not as a gentle unfolding, but as a catastrophic event, almost. Gopi Krishna's accounts, which are incredibly detailed, portrayed as just that, a terrifying ordeal. He called it a neck-and-neck race, with death on one side and insanity on the other.
Good grief.
This is what happens when that immense power hits a nervous system that isn't yet fully refined or prepared to handle it.
Okay, let's dive into the specific symptoms then. What do the sources describe happening during this crisis? Starting with the physical side, this internal furnace.
Yeah, the initial physical reaction is often likened to being trapped inside a furnace. The person experiences this terrifying, intense internal burning, literally from head to toe.
Like a fever.
Much worse than a typical fever, by the sounds of it. A fiery current darts violently through the body, especially up the spine, sometimes feeling like molten lead or raw electricity. And crucially, this intense internal heat exists in this shocking paradox.
Which is?
While they're burning up inside, the person is simultaneously outwardly cold as ice and shivering.
Burning hot inside, freezing cold outside, that must cause immediate and severe agitation.
Utter desperation, it sounds like. Imagine having an internal fire that no doctor can diagnose or treat. One seeker wrote something like, "Where could I go to escape from the furnace raging in my interior?" The body's systems are just completely overloaded,
Leading to
alarming physiological extremes. The heart thumps wildly, not just fast, but so loudly the person can actually hear their own heart pounding under their ribs like a drum. The pulse races madly.
This sounds like perpetual, intense physical exhaustion setting in.
Exactly. It's coupled with extreme, debilitating exhaustion. But here's the kicker. The nervous system is simultaneously so hyper-alert that it causes profound insomnia.
So you're exhausted but can't sleep.
Totally exhausted, unable to recover from even normal daily activities, yet simultaneously wired, completely unable to sleep. It leads to this feeling of total continuous fatigue breakdown.
And then there are the involuntary physical movements, the spontaneous yoga postures, the kriyas you mentioned. What do those look and feel like?
These can be really alarming for the person experiencing them. They're described as convulsive, sometimes erratic activity, as if the body is being attacked or manipulated by some unseen power.
Wow.
The practitioner might experience uncontrollable trembling, twisting, turning, or even rolling movements. Often, this results in their body being instinctively guided into complex yoga postures, spinal bends, headstands, specific kinds of breath work.
Things they hadn't learned.
Things they had never learned or intended to perform. It's as if the body itself is intuitively trying to align itself, to create pathways to handle the intense energy coursing through it, even when the conscious mind has no idea what's happening.
So that's the body trying to cope, trying to fix itself in a way. But what happens when the energy moves further up, hitting the head and the mind?
Well, the psychic shift is profound and immediate, often starting with intense physical pressure. People report crushing pressure in the head, especially the forehead and the back of the head.
Okay.
And sometimes this comes with a really strange sense of radical bodily change. The person might feel their head is literally swelling up, or that their entire physical form has expanded hugely.
Expanded?
Yeah, there's a reference in some Buddhist scriptures to the great body. One account mentions feeling suddenly 3 meters taller, totally changing their perception of their physical boundaries.
And the sensory overload must be terrifying, too. You mentioned loud sounds, vivid lights appearing internally.
Oh, they're described as dramatic phenomena. Orally, the person might hear loud, strange, profoundly dissonant sounds, sometimes described as continuous, almost machine-like noises.
Not pleasant sounds, then.
Definitely not. And visually, they experience intense inner light, what are called photisms. And these aren't just fleeting sparks. They're vivid, structured light forms.
Like what?
They can range from seeing luminous points or streams of white light, brilliant silvery streaks, or the famous Riesengroße Blau Pearl, the lens-sized blue pearl, which some masters describe as seeing the energetic matrix of the universe itself.
And to really bring home the intensity of this, one source describes the body itself seeming to transform into light.
That's perhaps the peak of the phenomenon, yeah. In one documented case, the seer experienced their entire physical body transforming into a kind of light tissue. They said it felt like bones did not exist.
Wow.
They saw bluish-white light circulating internally instead of blood. This kind of visceral change where the very structure of the body seems to dissolve or change state. That's the core reason why this transformation is apparently so difficult, so terrifying.
Right. Why does it meet such resistance? Why isn't it just instant bliss if it's our evolutionary destiny?
Because according to these sources, it triggers a deep animal fear, a profound biological resistance.
The body fighting back.
Exactly. This radical change is perceived by lower brain, the instinctual self, as dissolution, as death. It's the primal part of us panicking, fighting violently against leaving the familiar, predictable, instinctual pathways of our biological ancestry.
And the ego.
The ego, whose identity is completely bound up in the physical limitations and the sense of a separate self, experiences profound terror at its impending loss of familiar boundaries and its eventual dissolution. The crisis is so terrifying because the physical vessel itself is fighting tooth and nail against its own evolutionary mandate.
Okay. So once that initial terrifying crisis begins to stabilize, assuming the person gets through it and the energy channel is more open, the process starts yielding these astonishing new types of functioning. The nervous system has literally been, as you said, reshaped for a higher functional activity.
That's the idea. The mind no longer operates exclusively through the familiar physical senses.
Let's start with the altered consciousness, the psychic shift that goes beyond just normal waking or dreaming states. What does that look like?
Well, we see experiences of profound attachment and altered embodiment. Some practitioners report feeling, not quite synchronized with their physical body when they wake up.
How so?
Like needing to consciously go a few centimeters further inside myself to wake up, almost as if the consciousness and the physical vessel are slightly misaligned for a moment.
Strange.
And more profoundly, others report achieving full consciousness even during deep, dreamless sleep, which is fundamentally different from a lucid dream because the awareness is continuous, steady, not tied to dream imagery.
And the way sensory information is processed changes too. You mentioned bypassing the physical eyes.
Yes. A major ability that seems to manifest is being able to see with closed eyes. And this isn't described as imagination or just visualization. It's perceiving the external environment or specific internal symbols with incredible detail, like a true vision.
So that's evidence the energy has activated deeper centers in the brain.
Exactly. Allowing perception to occur without relying solely on the external visual mechanism. The inner eye opens, so to speak.
This awakening is also linked directly to developing intuitive and inner knowledge. They call it anupava. How does this manifest in practical terms? What new capabilities emerge?
It often shows up as spontaneous, sometimes uncontrollable creative productivity. We hear accounts of people suddenly being compelled to write complex, profound poetry or produce detailed paintings,
Without prior skill.
sometimes in languages they hadn't formally studied, or with an intensity and quality they could never achieve through normal conscious effort. It's like the intuitive mind, having been freed up, just floods the consciousness with creative insight.
And what about psychic interaction? Masters who've gone through this seem to demonstrate abilities that look supernatural to us.
Absolutely. The refinement of the nervous system allows for a kind of intense sensory input that bypasses conventional communication channels. We see compelling examples in the texts of masters reading other people's thoughts.
Like a guru knowing what a disciple is thinking.
Exactly. Knowing their secret plans or unspoken thoughts. The explanation isn't magic, but that the master's nervous system is operating at a vibration refined enough to receive subtle mental currents that the ordinary brain just filters out as noise.
The sources also talk about developing mastery over the physical form itself, including healing, and even this radical form of karma resolution.
Yes, the highest masters are said to exhibit mastery over the physical form to an incredible degree. We find these rather startling accounts of masters deliberately transferring the illness of others onto their own bodies.
Taking on someone else's illness. Why?
To alleviate the disciple's suffering. It's described as a temporary, voluntary acceptance of ailments, things like diabetes or even paralysis in one account. The underlying principle is that the physical body is ultimately understood to be a malleable form, a tool. And once self-realization is achieved, the master can manipulate it consciously for service and eventually dispose of it as needed without attachment.
And what about resolving old emotional or spiritual debts karma? That sounds like the ultimate shortcut, skipping lifetimes of trouble.
It really is presented as a hallmark of this accelerated evolution. The Kundalini awakening expands the individual's consciousness to the point where they become acutely aware of the mistakes, the karmic seeds, carried over from what they perceive as other lives.
Okay.
So instead of having to physically live out all those consequences, experiencing the poverty, the betrayal, the loss all over again in this life,
They deal with it mentally.
they can resolve that karma mentally. Through intense awareness, deep understanding, and acceptance, they essentially discharge the energetic debt in consciousness without having to physically play it out in the drama of this current life.
So assuming the practitioner has successfully navigated that intense crisis, stabilized the energy, integrated these new ways of functioning, what does the integrated life actually look like? How does a liberated soul operate in the world?
Well, they are living in that stabilized state we mentioned, nirvikalpa samadhi. And the world fundamentally changes for them. The individual maintains that perception of God, that union with the Absolute, even while moving freely and performing daily duties.
So they're fully engaged, but different.
Fully engaged with reality, yes, but utterly detached from its illusions. They are free from those three quirks of ignorance the texts talk about, and the very root, the seed of desire itself, has been destroyed.
It sounds like moving beyond the constraints of fate, astrology, all the things that seem to bind us in the mundane world. How does a liberated soul interact with what the rest of us call fate?
That goes back to the mastery we discussed. When someone progresses deeply in self-realization, their refined spiritual vibrations become so powerful they can actually act upon the entire universe. They're just vibrating at a different frequency than the dualistic world. Consequently, they become significantly less affected by external forces, by the ebb and flow of events, including things like astrological laws or predetermined fate, because they realize their true identity lies beyond all such constraints.
So they're not just a character in the cosmic story anymore.
Exactly. They're no longer just a figure tossed about in the cosmic film. They recognize themselves potentially as a co-creator, protected by this inner fortress built from refined consciousness.
Now, to understand the final freedom, the escape from the cycle of rebirth, we probably need to clarify the structure of human existence as presented in these sources. This idea of the three bodies.
Yes, that's crucial for understanding total liberation. The realized consciousness starts to perceive that existence isn't just this physical thing, it's layered.
Layered how?
You have the physical body, the gross earth body, the part we see and touch. Then there's the astral body, the subtle body of feeling and mind, the seat of emotions and energy currents. And finally, the causal body, the seed body, the body of ideas, which is like the blueprint or matrix containing all the concepts and past karmic tendencies.
Okay, so physical, astral, causal, like layers of an onion almost.
Kind of. You could think of the causal body as the deep blueprint, the astral body as the subtle wiring and energy patterns, and the physical body as the final manifestation.
And ultimate liberation means shedding all three.
Yes. While the awakened Kundalini is said to fully burn up all earthly karma related to the physical body, the soul might still carry astral karma, emotional patterns, desires, and causal karma, deep-seated ideas, the very notion of separateness.
Which means more rebirths.
Which could necessitate further rebirths, perhaps in subtle, non-physical realms, to work through that remaining karma. The final, ultimate freedom moksha comes only when the fully liberated soul, having shed all forms of karma entirely, finally sheds even the causal body. Then they merge back into the eternal, the absolute, achieving final freedom from the entire chain of rebirths, physical or otherwise.
This leads to that profound underlying realization mentioned throughout the texts, that our perceived universe, the one we navigate every day, is fundamentally an illusion, Maya.
Exactly. The sources are incredibly clear on this point. The universe, with all its apparent solidity and complexity, is essentially a colossal film, a play of light and shadow Maya, characterized by relativity, duality, constant change, inversion.
So planets, stars, life?
All just figures in a cosmic film, projected onto the screen of consciousness. The true reality, the absolute spirit, is not found within the film itself. It exists eternally beyond it.
How do they realize this?
The moment the yogi perceives the fundamental substance of the cosmos as pure, homogeneous light, where the light rays forming water are seen to be indistinguishable from the light rays forming land, the whole dualistic illusion just dissolves. They recognize they've been watching a colossal projection, and their true self is the projector, the light itself.
This has truly been a deep dive into what sounds like an accelerated evolutionary mandate encoded right into us. We've traced the path from the dormant energy at the base of the spine, through the scientific acceleration claimed by Kriya Yoga and breath mastery, into that terrifying internal fire and physiological breakdown during the crisis.
Yeah, the really rough part.
And finally, towards the state of liberation, cosmic consciousness, and seeing through the illusion of Maya.
And, what the collective wisdom of these sources consistently seems to reveal is that the biggest hurdle maybe isn't the complexity of the techniques.
No.
It might not even be finding a qualified teacher or putting in the sheer decades of effort required. The greatest barrier, it seems, is that initial, instinctive, almost animal fear that arises when the intense physical and psychic changes actually begin.
It's the ego, the sense of self, clinging fiercely to the familiar structure of the body, terrified of being redefined or even dissolved.
Right. This spiritual path, as described here, demands direct, often terrifying experience, rather than just intellectual belief. It demands the willingness to face that animal in us, as one text put it, that panics and throws up biological resistance the moment the familiar physical structure must be altered or transcended.
So the ability to endure the pain, the terror, treating the perceived illness as that unheeded guest, that proves to be the real test. The commitment to your own evolution.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
Self-overcoming in the most literal physiological sense.
So if the material body is, in this view, merely the vessel for an already predetermined evolutionary destiny, and the highest happiness is found only when consciousness expands beyond the ego, beyond that primal resistance, then we have to ask you, the listener, what current fear, whether it's a fear of change, a fear of loss, a fear of pain, might be subtly blocking your own personal, maybe even physiological evolution right now?
You've been listening to The Inner Ascent, where growth begins from within. If today's reflection resonated with you, consider sharing it or revisiting it later. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and keep rising.